I saw my ex-husband. He looked different, tired, broken, and distant. The man I had known for over 20 years, the man who had loved me unconditionally, now seemed like a stranger. His eyes, once filled with warmth and affection, were now cold and empty. I wanted to say something, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, but the words stuck in my throat. The courtroom was silent, except for the occasional murmur of the lawyers and the judge. My ex-husband didn't look at me once during the entire proceeding. The trial was a blur. My affair partner's wife testified, her voice shaking with anger and pain. She spoke about how her marriage had been destroyed, how she had trusted her husband, and how I had played a part in ruining her life. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground and never resurface. My ex-husband's family was there too, their faces filled with anger and disappointment. His sisters glared at me, and his parents looked at me with a mixture of sadness and disgust. When it was my turn to speak, I could barely get the words out. I admitted to everything: the affair, the lies, the betrayal. I told the court how I had taken my ex-husband for granted, how I had been selfish and foolish. I apologized to him, to his family, to my children, and even to my affair partner's wife. But no amount of apologies could undo the damage I had caused. The judge's verdict was harsh but fair. My ex-husband was given a suspended sentence for the assault, and he was ordered to attend anger management classes. As for me, I was left with nothing. My marriage was over, my family was shattered, and my children wanted nothing to do with me. I moved out of our family home and into a small apartment, where I spent my days alone, haunted by the memories of what I had done. I tried to reach out to my children, but they refused to see me. My sons, now 18 and 16, were old enough to understand what had happened, and they were furious with me. My twin daughters, only 13, were confused and hurt. They couldn't understand why their mother had betrayed their father, why their family had fallen apart. I wrote them letters, trying to explain, but they never responded. My ex-husband moved on with his life. He found a new job, made new friends, and eventually started dating again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was doing well, that he had found happiness again. I was happy for him, but it also hurt to know that he had moved on without me. I had lost him forever, and it was all my fault. As for me, I spent the next few years trying to rebuild my life. I went to therapy, joined support groups, and tried to make amends with the people I had hurt. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the guilt and shame of what I had done. I had betrayed the man who had loved me more than anything, and I had destroyed the family we had built together. Now, years later, I still think about my ex-husband every day. I think about the life we could have had, the love we could have shared, if only I had been stronger, if only I had been faithful. But I can't change the past. All I can do is live with the consequences of my actions and try to be a better person. I know I will never be able to make up for what I did, but I hope that one day, my children will forgive me. I hope that one day, they will understand that I made a terrible mistake, but that I still love them more than anything. And I hope that one day, I will be able to forgive myself. But for now, I live with the pain of my choices, a constant reminder of the selfishness that cost me everything. I saw him. The anger in his eyes hurt more than anything I could ever imagine. He had always looked at me with love, even when we were upset with each other. But during the trial, his gaze was filled with hate. I had to excuse myself to cry in the restroom. As the days passed, I was forced to recount every detail of my affair for everyone to hear. When I revealed how long it had been going on, my ex looked completely shattered. My father stood up and walked out of the courtroom. During my ex's testimony, I learned that he had come home to surprise me with lunch and a weekend trip to the Catskills. He had planned a romantic getaway, only to walk in on me with my affair partner. He admitted that when the other man told him to step aside, he snapped and attacked him. He only stopped when he threw me off his back. He then called the authorities, and we heard the recording in court. Hearing the pain in his voice, his sobs as he followed the operator's instructions, was soul-crushing. The affair partner couldn't testify verbally due to his injuries and heavy medication, so they used images of his condition. Seeing what my ex had done to him turned my stomach. My ex had shattered his eye socket, cheekbones, and jaw. There were even bone fragments too small to piece back together. My former partner was charged with a third-degree felony and sentenced to 7 years in prison. My sons protested loudly, my daughters and his family wailed, and the haunting memories still linger. The first 3 months after the incident were incredibly painful. I was sued by my affair partner's soon-to-be ex-wife for alienation of affection. My ex initiated a divorce. My eldest son moved out, my other son isolated himself, and my twins rebelled fiercely. My former sisters-in-law attacked me at the grocery store, and his mother spat in my face when I tried to apologize. My father and brother refused to speak to me. Eventually, I had to find a new job since there was no income, and I nearly depleted my savings. I was practically blacklisted in my field because the accounting firm I worked for faced bad publicity. I started working in retail and as a seasonal tax adjuster during the tax rush. I almost lost the house. My ex refused visits, and every letter I sent was returned. Crying in the shower became a daily occurrence. My parents almost separated because my mother constantly defended me, while my father refused to acknowledge me. Even lifelong friends were divided. I soon contemplated ending everything, packing up my belongings and disappearing. The guilt was overwhelming. Eventually, I sought therapy. My therapist scolded me, saying I had become too comfortable with my ex. I didn't see him as a husband but as a friend with benefits, and I treated him as such. She was right. I had taken him for granted. Almost a year passed in silence from my children. When I cooked dinner, they would collect their food and go to their rooms, refusing to look at me. I had meltdowns, begging them to say something, but they remained silent. My brother got married, and I wasn't invited, but my kids were. I continued trying to visit my ex, hoping he would add me to the visitor list, but I was always denied. Letters were still being returned, deepening my severe depression. One day, my brother showed up unexpectedly. He scolded me, revealing that my ex was in the infirmary after being stabbed during an attack by an inmate. The inmate had tried to assault him, and in the struggle, my ex was stabbed in the stomach while the inmate ended up with a broken spine. My brother screamed at me, "You did this," before leaving. I cried for days because he was right. I did this. For 4 additional years, I tried to visit my ex in the infirmary, but my attempts were futile. I wrote letters, but they were always returned. Thankfully, our children visited their father frequently, and I learned he had been placed in protective custody by my brother since the attack. Over the years, my eldest son attended the same college and pursued the same major as my ex. He only called his siblings and never wanted to talk to me. He never came home for holidays, only visiting his grandparents. My other son followed suit, going to the same college and refusing to speak to me. My twins were hard on me, but they visited their father weekly, which improved their moods. Whenever they acted out, their uncle disciplined them. My brother and I still hardly spoke. Attempts to visit his wife when they had their first child resulted in me being asked to leave. My mother kept me updated on what was happening in their lives, but my father still refused to acknowledge me. In early May this year, my kids seemed happier, and my son returned home. I didn't know why, and I didn't care, they were home. For 4 months, my children were around, and I did everything I could to express my apologies. Most of the time, I was ignored, but they started talking to me again. It brought me joy to have conversations with them and learn about their lives. My eldest had been dating someone for over a year, my second son was on a college track team, and even my girls started talking to me again. But this only intensified my self-hatred. Witnessing them smile, joke, and share dinner together made me realize how deeply I missed those moments. By the end of August, I was excited about the twins' first day of their senior year, which coincided with their 18th birthday. I shared my enthusiasm for their birthday party, but my girls asked if we could celebrate on a different day. This confused me, as I thought we were starting to heal. When I asked why, one of them said, "Because Dad is throwing us a party, and I don't want you near him." This comment shocked me. I asked when their father had been released, and they told me he got out at the end of April for good behavior. This broke me even more. They were around more because he was out, happier and more cheerful with their father back in their lives. It wasn't because we were starting to heal. They had him back. I asked where he was staying, and they told me he was living with my brother. I tried calling him, needing to talk to him, but he refused. I went over to my brother's house, holding all the returned letters from over the years. I saw my ex briefly through the crack in the door, shouted his name, and was asked to leave by my brother. I handed him the letters and left. In the driveway, I heard his voice. I turned around, and he was walking toward me. I instantly started crying and hugged him, but he coldly handed me back my letters, saying, "You forgot this." I cried as I watched him walk away. I begged and pleaded for him to talk to me, but he just walked back into the house. My children stared at me by the door, and in their eyes, there was no love for me. At that moment, I realized my children were just tolerating me. However, I still want to fix this. I want to tell him how selfish I was, how much I miss him, and apologize for destroying what we had. So, I'm still trying to push through my daily life. I learned from my mother that my affair partner's ex-wife had been visiting my ex for the past 2 years. I don't care about that, really. I just want him to somehow forgive me, talk to me, be beside me, and look at me the way he used to. I want my kids beside us. I just want my family back. Yet, I know I don't deserve it. Even if by some miracle we become one again, it will never be the same. I was selfish, and I wish I could take it all back. This is a response to my mother's post. I have tried hard to keep my past a secret. My college friends don't know that my dad spent time in prison, and I have no interest in sharing it with them. But as I walked around campus, I overheard people talking about a particular post. The words brought back a flood of emotions I had been struggling to suppress. After looking into it further, I found enough details to confirm that the post was about my family. I was furious. I immediately contacted my mother, and her emotional reaction led to an argument. Later, when I visited my father and confessed my frustration, it also turned into a confrontation. Despite everything, I still believe my father is a good man. He only scolded me for disrespecting my mother. He reminded me that even if I don't love her, I should still respect her. But it's hard to respect someone like her. My father went through many hardships and often emphasized that we should be grateful for growing up in a place where academic success wouldn't make us a target. He shared how difficult his life was in the South Bronx, where excelling in school and pursuing white things, like going to college, made him a target for ridicule. At just 15, my father lost his own dad to cancer. With no life insurance to help them, he had to step up as a surrogate parent to his 2 sisters. He worked hard to contribute to rent and food while still attending school. He considers himself lucky that his mother later remarried a good man, allowing them to move upstate for a better life. According to my uncle, back in the 90s, my dad's unique style, baggy clothes and a Puerto Rican flag shirt, made him a target for teasing. But instead of walking away, my father stood up for himself. His courage earned their respect. He even helped one of those same bullies, suggesting they skip school, share a drink, and talk things out. This turned into an unexpected friendship, and it was through that friend that my dad met my mother. They went to the same college, and by the end of their freshman year, they were married. Growing up, my parents were affectionate. They were always holding hands and kissing, even during my senior year, when things started to fall apart. My father adored my mother, but he never put her on a pedestal. He warned me not to do that, explaining that women don't respect a man who does. His philosophy was that a wife should be an equal partner, a best friend, and a confidant. This was a lesson passed down from both his father and stepfather. My dad was a big guy, 5 feet 11 inches and 260 pounds, but he was always joking and full of life. He would sing to my mom, bring her flowers, and write her love notes just because. He defended her honor and always reminded her of how beautiful she was. He set the standard for the kind of man a woman deserves. He also never gave up on my uncle, even when everyone else thought he was a lost cause. My grandfather once said that my dad knocked the stupidity out of him and left behind the man he was meant to be. That phrase always made me laugh. My father taught me how to be a man, a friend, and a husband. Before my mother's affair, she truly loved him. He was her rock. Even though they had what seemed like a perfect marriage, she destroyed it. I remember those months before the betrayal. She started talking down to my father, and though he pushed back, he always controlled himself. Despite having a college degree and a successful career as a financial advisor, my father could shift from being calm to assertive in seconds. My grandmother used to say he was just like his father, kind, respectable, and helpful, but never afraid to defend himself. Dad tried everything to save their marriage. He bought flowers, took her out to dinner, even danced with her. But she was distant, lost in her own world, treating him poorly. We all saw it. We all felt it, especially my younger siblings, my brother and twin sisters. But Dad kept smiling, reassuring us that everything would be okay. He convinced himself that she was just stressed from work. When she quit her job, we all thought that was the problem. Then Dad got arrested. Mom, do you have any idea how humiliated we were when the whole school was talking about it? Dad got arrested because you cheated. I couldn't even look at you. I stayed at Grandma's house because the sight of you disgusted me. When I visited Dad in jail, he couldn't even look at me. He was ashamed. He told me he had failed as a husband and as a man. I told him that wasn't true, but he insisted it was. He said a responsible man thinks about the consequences before doing something reckless. And as a husband, he felt like a failure because his wife had betrayed him. I begged him to look at me, but he wouldn't. And then you had the audacity to ask us for forgiveness. For the first time in my life, I wanted to hurt you. We were all suffering, and you had the nerve to ask for forgiveness. Sitting through that trial was the worst 25 minutes of my life. Listening to that 911 call broke me. I heard my father, this strong, loving man, crying and pleading for help. He kept repeating that the woman he loved had hurt us more than anything. I know you tried to defend Dad in court, but we told you not to. You did it anyway. Why? To prove that you still loved him? To tell the court that he was a good man? In my opinion, the moment you revealed how long your affair had lasted was the moment we lost him. If we had a decent lawyer instead of a public defender, maybe things would have been different. Because of you, I had anger issues. My brother became an alcoholic. One of the twins was suicidal. But you didn't notice. All you cared about was trying to fix things with Dad. You left me to take care of my siblings. I hated you. And in some ways I still do. When I went to college, I wanted nothing to do with you. Like my father, I became a surrogate parent to my siblings. I worked a full-time job, went to school, and still sent you money for bills. I know you were struggling, and I know you were depressed, but you had help. Grandma defended you out of loyalty, not because she believed in you. That's what the twins think, at least. When Dad got stabbed, I nearly lost it. I had just seen him that day. We joked about his prison body plan. I was halfway back to school when I got the call. I nearly crashed my car because my brain just shut off. It was hard on all of us. I never told anyone this, but I sat outside that man's apartment, ready to confront him. But when I saw him walking with a cane, I remembered what Dad said and drove away. As time passed, Grandma died. Then Grandpa, from a broken heart. Dad couldn't even attend their funerals. His sisters got married in the prison waiting room so he could still give them away. The damage you caused is beyond repair. And yet, you kept asking us to forgive you, to give you another chance. But you never gave us the space to heal. You just wanted to feel better about yourself. When Dad got out, he told us to talk to you, saying you were a good mother. So we did. And for a while, you were happy. It reminded me what it was like not to hate you. But Dad had a hard time finding work. One of his old clients eventually hired him. Then the twins told you the truth. Dad had been out for years. And when you showed up, it made him sick. He threw up after seeing you. He couldn't stand the sight of you. Stop fantasizing about getting back together. If you want to talk or fix things with your children, call me. But your post last week about our worst moment was pure selfishness. Dad sees you only as the mother of his children, nothing more.